Hi everyone, FIDE Master Dennis Monokroussos here for ChessLecture.com. And as of this recording, the World Blitz Championship, well, the Rapid and the Blitz Championship ended just several days ago. And while there were many very, very good games that we can look at from this event, every once in a while it's kind of fun to see these guys slip on a banana peel. So in this video and the next one, we'll engage in a bit of schadenfreude and enjoy seeing some of the very best players in the world just go completely astray and lose very quickly. So with that in mind, let's jump into this first game. This was played in round one of the Blitz Championship. White was Alexander Morozevich. Black is a good grandmaster, not an elite one, but a very good grandmaster named Peter Michalik, who is a mid-2500 player, or at least that's his, I'm not sure if that was his classical rating or his Blitz rating. But at any rate, let's see what happened. By the way, the reason I'm showing you these games is there's several reasons. So first of all, as I already stated, it's kind of fun every once in a while to be reminded that even the best players in the world are human, or at least the best human players in the world are only human, and can go wrong. And this can give us some hope, not only to forgive ourselves when we make mistakes, but also to realize that in Blitz games, we can beat these guys when we're playing well and they have just a little bit of a misstep. Also, it's a reminder of just how important tactics are. I mean, even these great players make tactical errors. Also, something that I've noticed many times in my own games, and certainly in Blitz, when I've managed to beat strong players, is that when you get them in somewhat unfamiliar positions, assuming the position is reasonable that you're getting, you don't want to get a bad position, but if it's a decent position, but it's one that's outside of their wheelhouse, sometimes you can do some damage. So there's another lesson. So part of this is just giving you a bit of hope for Blitz games against higher rated players, but it's also, again, a reminder of the importance of tactics and that we're all fallible and flawed and are capable of suffering even embarrassing losses. So back to this first game. This is Morozevich against Michalik, played in round one. So Morozevich plays the pawn Ziani. I don't know if this is a typical Morozevich opening, but it is typical of him to play slightly offbeat things. And any of you who are familiar with his career will know he's played all kinds of strange openings with Black in particular. He kind of made a reputation for himself playing the Chigorin and the Alban counter gambit against d4. So there's a sample. All right, so c3, d5, which is one of the best moves, queen a4. And now here, though, Michalik was probably surprised and was clearly not ready. So this is another little thing to bear in mind, that in Blitz especially, you can catch higher-rated players off, sometimes by playing slightly offbeat openings. So there are at least two good moves here. One is f6. Now, normally f6 is not a move you want to play, but this is considered to be very good. White generally is considered to have nothing better here than d3. And after bishop e6, the potential weakness of the light squares is covered. So there's no real problem with f6. Another idea for Black is to play bishop to d7 with a temporary pawn sack, e d5, knight d4, queen d1 is forced, knight takes f3, queen f3, knight f6, and I give a bit more analysis of this in the PGN, but it's considered that Black has full compensation for the pawn, and indeed he has a plus score from this position. So there are at least two good options here for Black, but what Michalik played, while very natural, is not a good option. He played d takes e4. After knight takes e5, I think White has a slight pull. And here, Black should play queen of d5. But for whatever reason, Michalik played knight f6. So maybe his thought was that White would play knight c6, he would play bc, queen c6, bishop d7, and then play bishop d6 and castles. And here I think he would have pretty good compensation for the pawn. So that made sense. But what I'm sure he missed is bishop to c4. And again, these are the kinds of disasters that can befall you when you're outside of what you know. And of course, this is true of us too, not just of strong grandmasters. So anyway, already here after just 6 moves, and the first 3 moves, or 2.5 moves, consisting of White playing a semi-joke opening, already White has a significant edge. So the game went like this: bishop e6, takes, 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 and takes, and takes, and White sets up a pawn pretty much for nothing here. And f3 is a good move. So it eliminates this e4 pawn. You might think, well, gee, why are we getting rid of this doubled pawn? Well, the reason is that it's cramping us. So we get rid of it, we open the F file, we're already a pawn up, and black has 3 isolated pawns, and his king is exposed. So really what's key for us in a situation like this is just to finish our development, make sure nothing bad happens, and then the game will more or less win itself, and that's what happens. So it takes. Here I think rook F3 is maybe a little better than queen F3 is a little bit better than rook F3, but rook F3 is okay. Rook F8, D4, and here black goes awry again. So the normal move to play would be king to G8, but he was probably worried that this e-pawn would be a bit of a problem for him, and so he decided to try to liquidate it straight away. But again, these are the kinds of terrible decisions that a player can make in an unfamiliar situation. And after queen to c4 check, all of a sudden it's very clear that e5 was a terrible move. Now the king is not going to get back to safety. It's going to be stuck in the middle of the board. So here, white is just completely winning after only 14 moves. So king e7, bishop g5, h6, takes, and now knight to d2. Good move. So just completing his development as rapidly as possible. Here, black makes another mistake, although it goes unpunished, and he's losing in any case. But he plays queen to g8. Here, d takes e5 would have won even more material. So, of course, if queen c4, e takes f6 check, or for that matter, e takes d6, but might as well take the rook, that would win more material. And after bishop e5, rook e3 is going to pick up the bishop. So that would have been even better. But, okay, Morozevich played a little bit less accurately, but still a very good move. Queen e2, rook e6, rook a to f1, and black makes yet another bad move, and this time it's the game is just irretrievably lost. I mean, it was already lost, but now big material falls. So rook f7 check, and black resigned. Or no, he didn't yet. He took, and now he resigned. The move before, he couldn't retreat his king because queen takes e6, wins a rook for nothing with imminent mate, and after queen takes f7, rook f7, the problem is that after king f7, queen f3 check will pick up the rook in the corner. So black resigned. Well, actually, I suppose you can limit the material damage slightly with bishop to f4. So if queen a8, there's bishop d2. So probably white would just play queen f4. But in any case, at the very least, white will have a queen, knight, and several pawns against a couple of rooks. So an absolutely devastating win. And again, this illustrates the value of playing sidelines where you know what you're doing against better players, at least in Blitz. It gets them out of their comfort zone. And but again, make sure that you do this in a setting where you're not taking undue risks yourself. All right, let's take a look at another one. And this time, the underdog wins. So in the first game, Morozevich was certainly a favorite and won quite easily. But here we see that these principles apply when you're playing up, which is what I've been suggesting. So this is played between David Anton Guerrero, a very strong young Spanish grandmaster, and the very, very strong Chinese grandmaster Wang Hao. So Wang Hao has been a consistent 2700 player for some years now. I believe he's beaten Carlsen at least a couple of times, at least once, but I think twice. So, you know, a very, very strong player. And while Anton Guerrero is a very good player in his own right and an up-and-comer, he is, normally speaking, not in Wang Hao's league just yet. But watch what happens. So we have a knight orf. And, of course, you know, while this is an opening that you can specialize in with white, people who play the knight orf with black certainly know what they're doing. Now, there are many moves here, as I'm sure many of you know. Bishop to g5 is kind of the old classical move. Bishop c4 was a Fischer specialty. Bishop to e3 has been the main move for a long time. Bishop e2 was a very big move in the 60s and 70s in particular, and still kicks around now. It was championed by the great Soviet grandmaster Efim Geller, as well as world champion Anatoly Karpov for many years. H3 is another move that's been kicked around quite a bit. Fischer played it a few times. Carlsen has played it. Kryakin has played it, and many other top grandmasters. G3 had a brief flurry of popularity, but it kind of faded out. Rook to G1 is a sideline that was used by Ivanchuk to beat Kasparov some time ago, although that's not really thought to be so significant. There are other moves too. F4 had a flurry of popularity, but how about this one? Queen to D3. So this is a move I don't think I'd seen before. If I did, it was for maybe 2 seconds once. Very unusual move. What in the world is the idea of this? I mean, we're all taught not to bring our queen out early in the opening. And at first glance, at least, it isn't obvious what this is supposed to do. And I have to say, it doesn't get any more obvious in the next couple of moves either. So Wang Hao played knight b to d7, and there are other good moves too. G6 has been played here, E5 has been played here, and doubtless other moves are possible too. By the way, I would say that Anton Guerrero played this a couple of other times this year as well. One more time in this Blitz championship, or maybe it was in the Rapid event, and then he also played this against a lower-rated player in I think a regular tournament in Skopje. So he's one specialist, and if you're interested in this, Vallejo Pawns played this I think 3 times in Dubai in the Rapid and Blitz championships as well. So I don't know if this is really any good, but it might be a new direction. Certainly, it has the effect of eliminating thousands of pages of theoretical material in a single shot. All right, so after knight b to d7, Guerrero played bishop to e2. Or maybe I should say Anton. So Anton Guerrero. So Anton played bishop to e2, and again, it's really not clear what the idea of queen to d3 is. I mean, the one idea that's kind of obvious is to put the queen on g3, which is a somewhat normal square for the queen in a number of Najdorf positions. But that doesn't end up happening in this game, so it's kind of odd. All right, now here g6 and e6 have been played in some other games, some of Vallejo Pawns games against Grishuk and against Li Kuang Liam. But Wang Hao played knight to c5, and already we're only on move 7. We're in brand new territory. All right, well here queen g3 is of course impossible because the e4 pawn would hang. So queen e3 was played, and it's a very peculiar position. I mean, what in the world is the queen doing on e3? It does support f4 and e5, but this also didn't happen. All right, well in this position it looks like e5 is the best move for black, but e6 normally looks like a reasonable move. I mean, it usually is a reasonable move, but here, oddly enough, white has a good move, though he didn't play it, but the engine, at least, is pretty high on b4. Now, b4, of course, is not an everyday move in the Najdorf, but this is not an everyday position, and it forces black to simply waste a couple of tempi. White is not going to castle queenside, so it's not the weakness that this move could create in its wake is not as serious as it would be. And the 2 tempi, I think, are more important, so white will castle kingside, play bishop b2, f4, and maybe even g4 with some strong play. All right, well, Anton was also kind of freewheeling it and played bishop to d2. Now, normally, a Najdorf bishop to d2 is not going to strike any terror into black, but with the queen on e3, it's maybe not quite as bad. All right, bishop to e7. Again, I think b4 is reasonable, but Anton played g4, so a more direct approach on the king side. All right, well, I think Wang Hao reacted properly here. So a very standard rejoinder to g4 in many open Sicilians is d5. And here, too, I believe it's correct. After e takes d5, though, I think knight takes d5 was perhaps a better choice, simply because after e takes d5, black still has to worry about g5 coming. So I think it would have made black's job a bit simpler after knight takes d5. So let's say takes, bishop f3, castles, and now maybe bishop to d7, semi-sacrificing the d5 pawn. I mean, not really because g4 would drop, but fundamentally, black wants to get the queenside play going as fast as possible with rook c8 and so on. So I think black is okay here, but it's a very, very murky position. So this, in my opinion, would have been black's best bet. Instead, he played e takes d5, and after castles, and then f3, taking the e4 square away, as well, of course, as defending the g4 pawn, which arguably doesn't need to be defended because if black takes, the g file opens up. But anyway, it takes control over e4 and g4. And here I think black needs to be kind of careful. Maybe the best moves here were rook to e8, at least hinting at some tactical possibilities on the e file. And another decent move is knight to e6, challenging the knight and preparing bishop to c5, among other things. Well, instead, and again, this once more is the kind of thing that could happen when you're in an unfamiliar position, disaster struck rapidly. So Wang Hao played bishop to d7, and this was what I recommended in the position where the knights had been traded, right, where black played knight takes d5 instead of capturing with the pawn. But now it makes a difference. g5, and this poor knight has nowhere to go. e4 has been taken over, and also the d5 pawn is meaningfully hanging, while black cannot take the g4 pawn, which he could have done in the position where the knights were traded. So here, black played knight h5, and now not knight takes d5, which is all right. I mean, white's better here too, but after rook e8, it's not quite as clear. Again, there's some potential for mischief along the e file. But instead, Anton played very well. He played f4, taking advantage of this miserable offsides knight, forcing g6, and now after takes, and now taking on d5, you can see that the position is really just hideous for black. So he can't really move the bishop from e7 because it gives the f6 square to the knight, and well, black's king is just very exposed, and he's a pawn down on top of it. So the game ended pretty quickly. Rook e8. Okay, makes sense. Threatening bishop takes g5, sort of. Although actually not, because I think just queen to g3. So there isn't even that threat. All right, so white played bishop to c3, lining up on this big, dangerous diagonal. And now bishop to g4. So here for a second it looks pretty good. He's threatening the rook on d1. He's threatening the knight on d5. And he's threatening bishop takes g5. But this momentary glimpse of happiness is an illusion that was coldly, well, black received a cold awakening after the move knight f5. So this is just crushing. And the threat is to take on e7, but there's another threat. And it doesn't matter really what black does. If he takes the rook, or as in the game, if he takes the knight, queen to e5 is kaboom. So the threat is made on g7 or on h8. And of course, he's also threatening just to recapture the bishop. And this is what happened. f6, forced, queen f5, and you know what's black going to do? So simply knight f6 is a threat. Black played queen to c8, but still, after knight takes f6 check, black gave up. So he's losing just tons of material and probably is simply getting mated. So he had enough already at this point. So a complete and utter disaster. And again, a very nice illustration of the fact that people, when you get them out of their comfort zone, will make, or at least very, very inclined to make bad moves. I mean, chess is to a very, very large degree about pattern recognition. And if the patterns you recognize aren't there, well, you're on your own, and even the best of us are gonna go astray. All right, so time for the next one here. Let's see another miserable disaster. All right, this game was played between Shakhriyar Mammadjarov, one of the best players in the world, and Judith Polgar, who's certainly herself one of the best players in the world. She's been as high as number 8. Right now, she's, I think, around number 50, number 60, something like that. But still, you know, is near 2,700 and is always an incredibly dangerous player. But in this game, not dangerous at all. This game was really incredible. So Mammadjarov had white and played the Trumpovsky. Okay, decent opening, but nothing that should win as quickly as we see in this game. So knight e4. By the way, this reminds me, I don't remember how many moves it was, but there was, I think, a regular slow game played about 10 years ago between Peter Wells, who's a solid English grandmaster, but certainly not a player in the world's elite, and Alexei Shirov, who at that time was a consistent world top 5, top 10 player. And Wells played the trump, which he was a specialist in, and had, in fact, even written a book on. And Shirov managed to lose in well under 20 moves. I mean, it was just an utter disaster. So that's part of what makes the trump an interesting opening, is that while it, I think, doesn't promise any advantage against best play by black, it leads to very unusual positions where if you're the specialist, if you're the one who plays the trump regularly, you're often going to have a pretty big experience advantage over your opponents. Okay, well, let's see what happened here. So bishop to h4. Bishop f4 is also an important move. d5, f3, knight d6, knight c3, c6, e4, and Polgar played the counterattacking queen to b6, which is a typical kind of move in a lot of these d-pawn openings where white is very quick to bring out the dark squared bishop. So that bishop runs away, and the queen comes over to play against the b2 pawn. Well, the usual move here by a pretty big margin is rook to b1, but in blitz chess, of course, you should sacrifice such pawns. And so Mamedyarov did. He played queen to d2. But here, Polgar, I think kind of uncharacteristically, well, maybe uncharacteristically, didn't put white to the test with queen takes b2, which is what should be played. So queen to b2, rook to b1, queen a3, e takes d5. And now I think while c takes d5, knight d5, queen a2 is kind of murky, I think the best thing for black to do is to play g6. And the idea of this is not so much to play bishop to g7, though depending on what white does, maybe that'll happen, but to play bishop h6, taking advantage of this guy being a bit loose over here. So I think this position is well, first of all, it's very unclear, it's very, very murky, but I think black has good chances at this point. So that would be my recommendation with black. So instead, Polgar backed down and played e6. And this is, I think, both objectively and practically speaking, a mistake. If you play queen b6 but not queen takes b2, then what are you doing? The queen move makes no sense whatsoever otherwise. And it's also, of course, just backing down psychologically. So Mamedyarov got everything he wanted. He's castled queenside. He's ahead in development. And black has trouble now finishing her development because, you can't play bishop to e7 because takes, and after king takes, the king isn't castling. So, whatever Polgar is going to do to get finished in development, it's not going to be very easy at all. So she played another remarkable move, d takes e4. So this, too, is terrible. I mean, this, I guess she was afraid of e takes d5 and knight takes d5 ideas, maybe. But this is just bad. I mean, now white gets a better center. d5 ideas are lurking. The knight can come to f3 in one shot. So white has more space, a big lead in development, and the chance to blow open the center pretty quickly. And, when I was looking at this game, I was thinking the young Judith Polgar would be cringing at what her older counterpart is doing. I mean, she would be the one on the white side of this, just, developing speedily and then getting ready to crush black in the center. Well, here, Polgar played queen to a5. So another queen move. White played king to b1, so a kind of standard prophylactic move, and also with a concrete idea in mind, which we'll see after Polgar's next move, which is amazing. I mean, this is just, incredible. I mean, maybe this was some other player whose last name was Polgar and not Judith, because, first of all, it's a very simple tactic, one that she would have seen when she was 10 years old in, a second or less. So knight to d7 is a catastrophic blunder, and the game ends in one move, knight to d5. So just staggering. Black has no way to save her queen that doesn't allow mate on c7. So queen d2, knight c7 is checkmate. So she resigned after knight to d5. All right, so that was really, really incredible. Okay, finally, one more game. All right, and this is played between Levon Aronian, number 2 in the world, and Francisco Vallejo Pons, who's a regular 2700 player. All right, so this is kind of a funny game. So this one goes a little bit outside of the lessons that we've been preaching here. So it's in this game that Vallejo offered a novelty. So let's jump ahead here. Let's go forward. So we've got a Rogozin system, or maybe this is a Vienna. I mean, these things can turn one to the other. Well, E4 for sure is a Vienna. So I'm not sure if it's called a Vienna or if it's just a Rogozin after A3. At any rate, takes, whatever you call it, this is the position that arose. And in fact, a couple of years ago in Bilbao, or Sao Paulo and Bilbao, the tournament was played in 2 locations. The same players with the same colors and almost identical ratings, in fact, too. Aronian was 1 rating point higher, Vallejo was 1 rating point lower. So in that game, Vallejo played c takes d4, e takes d4, queen to d5, and it was a complicated game, and it ended up in a draw by perpetual check around move 33 or so. But this time around, Vallejo varied. Now, normally when you vary, it's because you've prepared an improvement, but this does not seem to be the case here. So h6 was played, takes, bishop c4, and I think white's a bit better here. No real reason why he shouldn't be, so he's got a small lead in development, a better center. Of course, black is hoping that he can neutralize white's play in the center and down the road end up with a useful 2-on-1 queenside pawn majority. But in this game, it doesn't quite work because he never quite had enough time. So castles, b6, and now a good move, knight to e5. And this threatens queen, well, it doesn't really threaten queen f3, but it threatens f4, then queen f3. So black's got to be a little bit careful about this long diagonal. And additionally, the knight getting posted up on e5, a la Pillsbury. So if you know what I'm talking about, look up some of Harry Nelson Pillsbury's Queen's Gambit games where he's white back in his day in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and you'll see what I mean. So this idea in the Queen's Gambit of posting the knight up with knight e5, playing f4, rook f3, and so on is referred to as the Pillsbury plan. Anyway, after knight to e5, I think knight to d7 was best, but very natural move. Vallejo played bishop to b7. What could be more obvious than that? Okay, f4. White is, I think, definitely better here. Kind of funny idea here. Bishop to e4 is not a bad move. And I don't know if it's the best move, but one of white's good options here is kind of amusing. Rook f3. So if bishop takes f3, queen f3, and the knight is dominated. So, the knight has to move, because otherwise white wins the rook on a8. But, of course, when the knight moves, it's lost. So white's going to get at least 2 pieces for rook if black takes. And, of course, if he doesn't take, then the rook is going to migrate over to another square and have good attacking chances. That said, bishop to e4 was still probably the best move here. Instead, black played g6, stopping f5 ideas, and now queen g4. And here, bishop to e4 is played by Vallejo pawn. So here we could say that this game illustrates, among other things, that if you have some kind of fundamental tactical liability, when tricky things happen, those liabilities will often come to bite you. So we've already seen a couple of times that black has some problems on this diagonal because the rook is loose, it's unprotected, so loose pieces drop off, as the expression goes, and this knight is dominated. So how did white take advantage of it? Well, very effectively. f5, and black resigned. See, isn't chess easy? The point is, okay, g takes f5 is illegal, queen takes f5 loses the queen. If e takes f5, then simply queen takes e4 wins a piece for nothing. F takes e4, rook f6. Well, okay, I guess not for nothing. You got one pawn for it, but it's more or less for nothing. And finally, if bishop takes f5, then queen f3, taking advantage of the dominated, well, the trapped rook and the dominated knight. Now, okay, the other thing that black could do is just to retreat his bishop somewhere, d5, b7, whatever. But then, I mean, let's say you go here, f takes g6 is a catastrophe because we're attacking the queen, and then we're going to take this with double check, and the bishop comes back here, and it's a massacre. So Vallejo simply resigned after f5. All right, so we've seen some of the very best players in the world just completely collapse. Granted, these were blitz games, but again, these guys can play fantastic chess even with very little time on their clocks. So this is a reminder, again, of the importance of tactics, of the advantage that you can get by staying in familiar positions. There's a reason why people play, study their openings and learn theory. It's not just because these moves may or may not be better, but because the more you study it, the better you understand what's going on, the better you play. So I hope you enjoyed these games. Next time we're going to take a look at some disasters where white even managed to lose quickly. And that's an even bigger trick. I mean, it's much harder to lose quickly with the white pieces than with black, but it can be done, and we shall see this in the next video. All right, I will see you then. Until then, this is FIDE Master Dennis Monokroussos, signing off for ChessLecture.com. Bye-bye.